All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's so lovely to see all of you. Welcome to Berkeley Law, and congratulations on your admission. Woo! So we're so eager to welcome you today to this very special place, this very special community that is Berkeley Law. And today we're going to talk to you specifically about the clinical program and the robust range of clinical offerings here at Berkeley Law and what makes it so unique. In terms of the format for today's conversation, I'm going to be speaking with my co-panelists here. We're going to talk about why taking a clinic can be a really impactful part of your legal career. And specifically, you can learn more about what to expect as a student doing a clinic here at Berkeley Law. We'll then save some time at the end to turn it over to you all for questions that you might have for us. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll introduce ourselves first. My name is Rosa Bay. I'm the co-deputy director at the East Bay Community Law Center, home to 8 of the community-based clinics here at Berkeley Law.
And hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Campos-Bui. I'm an assistant clinical professor here, and I co-direct our policy advocacy clinic. I also went to Berkeley Law, class of 2014, so can answer questions from the perspective of being a student here and doing clinics.
Hello, and I'm Catherine Crump. I'm the director of the Samuelson Law, Technology, and Public Policy Clinic. It's so great to see you all.
All right. So the clinics here at Berkeley Law are really here to advance racial, economic, and social justice through a 3-pronged mission. And that's really teaching, service, and research. As part of its teaching mission, the clinical program prepares you all, law students, to address pressing social problems and to become highly skilled, responsible, and reflective legal practitioners. As part of its service mission, the clinical program provides first-rate legal services to underrepresented individuals, marginalized communities, and public-minded organizations locally, nationally, and even at the global level. Finally, as part of its research mission, the program is producing cutting-edge, interdisciplinary research to support litigation, inform public policy, and to increase the efficacy of our teaching and service. So you can see here from this slide that the law school really offers an incredible and expanding breadth of offerings. So we have 6 clinics located here at the law school in-house, and we have 8, as I mentioned, at East Bay Community Law Center. So why? Why do a clinic? We're going to talk to you in a moment about really the opportunities that present with engaging in a clinic at Berkeley Law, particularly as it relates to getting hands-on experience, getting a sense of what it is to be a lawyer while receiving really close hands-on supervision. So I want to pose a question to my co-panelists now. Really, what are the skills that students can hope to learn and develop doing a clinic here at Berkeley Law? Maybe speaking to your experience in your particular clinics.
I can start. I think for me, one of the biggest skills that I learned in participating in clinic is just what it means to represent a client. I think you'll go through your first year of law school, maybe do some of the student slips, I forget what it stands for, and get some interaction with what it means to actually see the law in practice. But doing a clinic, you're kind of 16 hours, a little bit more full-time, understanding what it means to put the law into practice, from understanding the problem that your client is facing to trying to identify where in the law there may be a solution and figuring out what to do with that. So you're really in the driver's seat trying to figure out how to navigate and act on behalf of your client. So I think that was a big one for me. You'll also get to practice some advocacy skills, so oral advocacy, depending on the clinic that you join. There are definitely some clinics that are more, you'll make appearances in court. I know for me, I participated at the East Bay Community Law Center. I did hearings in front of administrative law judges, arguing on behalf of my clients for Social Security benefits. You also do written advocacy. A lot of our clinics do kind of legal research, social science research, either do some briefings, or you may be doing some reports. So in the policy advocacy clinic, and I also know in the Samuelson clinic, we do public-facing reports that can help influence policy and legislation. So depending on what you're interested in getting out of the clinic, I think we have a lot of offerings that are really tailored to the things that you're interested in practicing and honing, or things maybe you also haven't been exposed to and you want to see if it's for you or not. But I will let my co-panelists also chime in.
Yeah, I think all of that is right. I mean, I would just say concrete lawyering skills, which can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes you might be doing litigation. Sometimes you might be doing regulatory work, trying to convince an agency to pass a particular rule. Sometimes you might be trying to do something in front of a city council. And in all of these cases, your doctrinal 1L classes teach you great skills about how to read a case, how to research the law, how to figure out what a statute says. But then you have to figure out how to actually argue in court or put together an argument that would be persuasive to a regulatory body. And practice, right? It's the practice of law is one of the things that allows you to hone those skills. And you can begin that while you're still a law student in the clinic, so that by the time you get to your firm or nonprofit judge or job or clerkship, you already have some of those practical skills that allow you to use what you've been learning.
And I think I would just add that, there's no expectation in our clinics that you have previous experience engaging in any of the work that we do. And it can be a daunting experience. We expect that for many of you, you're doing these things for the very first time. And we really approach our teaching and supervision with a growth mindset. We understand that you're learning. We're here to support that learning. We really push you out of your comfort zone, push you to try new things in a safe and supportive environment. And that's really important. I would say the other things that you can develop in clinic is sort of the skills around what it is to balance competing demands on your time. So clinic is a big commitment. You enroll in a minimum of 4 units as a new student of clinic. That translates to roughly 16 hours a week. And you take a companion seminar along with that meets once a week for a couple of hours. So it is a time commitment. And as Stephanie explained, you are in the driver's seat. It's a great deal of responsibility, but it is a wonderful opportunity. You're going to get to do things and have a level of responsibility that you would rarely see early in your legal career. And you, again, with the support of your individual supervisor, really learn the skill of balancing these competing priorities on your time. Again, it's an important professional skill that many of us are still working on. It's a process, and so clinic is a great space to begin to do that. And so you'll receive fantastic mentoring and support along the way. Which brings me to my next question, which is really about the unique nature of the working relationship between the faculty in clinics and students, and whether you can comment on that. What makes it unique? Also, what makes the relationships that students have working on projects together? What's unique about that in clinic?
Yeah, I mean, I have the luxury of being a clinical professor, which means I typically am supervising 6 to 8 students a semester, which means I get to work closely with people and to give them really detailed feedback and to know their strengths and weaknesses really, really well. I think that kind of collaboration is also just really fun, right? So for example, right now, my clinic is working together with the ACLU of Northern California to write comments to the governor about what the rules of the road should be when government agencies want to deploy artificial intelligence, right? So there's me and 2 students, and we meet several times a week, and we're working on these comments and thinking about the kinds of issues these new technologies pose. And so it's a really intimate relationship, and it's a really intense working relationship. So I think that's one thing we get out of it. I would also say that I think a lot of students end up going to law school because they were the type of student who liked to do the group project by themselves earlier, right? There's sort of a perfectionistic tendency. But when you practice law, it ends up often being a team sport, and it gives you the chance to start figuring out how to negotiate those working relationships involving peers and supervisors in a safe environment where we can give you feedback, right, on how to do that. And it allows all of us to tackle bigger projects than we could if we were just working individually.
Yeah, and I just underscore the supervision and individual kind of mentoring. I think oftentimes you may do internships and externships, and you may get a really good supervisor who lets you do a little bit more or gives you really good feedback, but that's kind of not their primary goal. Our goal in the clinics is to teach you, to give you feedback, and so sometimes I know students feel like we give them more feedback than they want, but that's our goal. And so I think that's a really important piece about clinics. And I think the other piece is likely you'll be participating in a clinic where you have either kind of a subject area, interest, or particular skill, and we often have the networks and relationships that are going to be really helpful for you in finding summer jobs, post-graduation. So I feel like a lot of the work we do too is connecting students to people in the field, whether that's on our projects that we're working on, or, hey, they're like, I want to be a public defender, and, a lot of us are working with public defenders day to day, and we can put you in touch with the people to figure out if it's a good fit for you. And then on the team side of things, I think you'll see in your small mods and large mods, a lot of the work is going to be a little bit more individualized. And I think, like Catherine said, when you actually go into practice, so much of your work is done on a team. I rarely do anything where I'm not running it by other people. And so it's really important to get in the habit of figuring out how to ask for feedback, communicating with the team. So that's a really great way to practice that too in law school, because not everything's going to be geared towards kind of teamwork.
Yeah, I think there's something very unique about the supervisory relationship between student and clinical teacher. I think there's an arc to the semester in clinic. So we start out understanding, again, as I mentioned before, that many of you have never done these things before. It's new material, new skills you're developing, and so it's we perhaps start in a more directive kind of place as your supervisor, and teaching you the foundational skills that you need to get going in your work. But as the semester goes on, we really start to shift things and start to ask you what you think in terms of what should happen next. And I think it's a really wonderful thing to see, to have that sort of pass the reins to the student, and you engage your sort of curiosity and creativity about which direction the case should go. In that individual supervision space. So at EBCLC, at the Law Center, just for additional context, we're a nonprofit organization that is affiliated with Berkeley Law. We have 2 offices right here in Berkeley in the community. And so we provide a high volume of direct legal services to the community, serving thousands of clients every year in all of the different practice areas that we have. And so what that means is that as a student at EBCLC, you will likely work with multiple clients on multiple cases over the course of your time with us. And so in those individual supervision meetings, often we're preparing you to, because you are the person that is actually meeting with the clients and having those communications. So we're planning out what those meetings are going to look like, talking through your agenda. You might be getting ready for a hearing. So for instance, we have a education justice clinic that represents young people here in the Bay Area that are potentially facing expulsion from school. And so you would represent these young people who are the clients at expulsion hearings, administrative hearings. And so we would be prepping with students to do witness examination or opening and closing statements. Students in our clinic meet weekly all together for what we call case rounds, where you talk about issues that are coming up in your cases. You might moot your arguments and get feedback from your peers. And it's just, as Stephanie mentioned, it's a wonderful place also to really get in the habit of collaborating, right? Like the best work really comes out of that iterative process where you're getting feedback, incorporating it, and bouncing ideas off of one another. So clinic is a wonderful place to practice that skill. And you touched on this a bit, Stephanie, but I did want to spend another moment here, which is, how does participation in clinic impact, you think, your career path or job prospects as a student?
Well, I think sometimes it helps you figure out what you want to do, and also just as valuably, sometimes what you don't want to do, right? You can just take a semester and try something new and see if you like it, right? After you leave law school, your career, I think, often becomes narrower in the sense that you just start to develop an expertise, and then you have some path dependency, right, about what you really know. And law school is this wonderful time where you can try immigration law, you can try consumer protection law, you can try business law or startup, whatever. You try all these different things and get a sense of what you like. And then I think law school also involves starting to build a professional network. So numerous of my students have gone on to actually be hired by clients that the clinic had. So our clients include the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, or the ACLU, or the Knight First Amendment Institute. I'm sure this is true for other clinics as well. So a student comes to the clinic, works for an organization whose work they admire, and it's a good match, and then that can launch a public interest career.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely had students who do really well on a project and their client is looking to hire a fellow, or they in turn are working for a firm and there's an opportunity to do pro bono year, and there's just like a good match, and so it's almost like it's a built-in audition in some ways, or a built-in interview, and so it's really helpful to be able to work with other people in the area that you're interested in. I know for me, I was one of the people who did clinic and figured out what I didn't want to do. I did direct services, and I thought it was really powerful for me. I found myself really emotionally drained every day, not being able to do enough on behalf of my clients, and that's why I kind of went into policy work, trying to address some of the systemic issues and really change just bad law and practice, and so that really helped to figure my path out for me. So definitely want to underscore, it's not like something that you're going to have to be tied to for the rest of your career. A lot of our students use what they do in clinic to inform and actually stand out amongst their peers. I have some students who went on to be public defenders, did the policy clinic, but what they learned in the policy clinic and the angles that we would often entertain of, your client's being charged fees and fines for being put on a particular probation supervision, and they know just to call up the probation supervision agency and see like, hey, I actually don't think you should be charging that. Like, where's the contract or where's the policy that you're doing this for? And that kind of made them stand out amongst their other public defender kind of peers. So again, I think there are so many good reasons why you should do a clinic, and it doesn't need to be just because you want to develop expertise in that particular area.
Yeah, I would also say these skills are truly transferable, I think, to so many different settings. So I think maybe there's a common misconception. It's like, well, I'm planning to go to a law firm, and, I'm not really on the track to do public interest work, so maybe, clinic isn't necessarily for me. I think, again, what we're doing in clinic provides skills that can really transfer to all kinds of different settings. Just as an example, in our housing clinic, you will get experience writing a motion, for summary judgment. You will potentially get experience taking a deposition. Those are skills you can take with you if you're doing litigation at a firm. You can, certainly employ those skills there. So regardless of what you think your path may be, even if you're still exploring, there's value to be had in doing a clinic. And really, again, with the offerings that we have here at Berkeley Law, you can't go wrong. It is, it is a great opportunity. And I would say, for those students that are interested in doing public interest work after law school, it is a small community. We are connected to so many organizations, people in organizations, and so it is not uncommon that we have, helped our students again, to obtain employment after law school, even if they, the other thing about the law is that often, the first job that you have outside of law school or after law school is not the job that you're necessarily going to stay at for the rest of your career. There's a lot of movement and a lot of change, and so we stay in touch with our students. I have served as a reference for more than a decade for some of my students as they make various transitions, and always happy to be a support along the way. So just know these are important connections that you're making that hopefully will benefit you for a very, very long time. I'm going to move us to the next question, or next topic, which is, we've been talking about why do a clinic, what is the value of clinic? Well, now we're going to shift a little bit to talking about why a clinic at Berkeley Law specifically. What makes this a special and unique opportunity? So I want to ask the question of what social justice issues are particularly impactful or ripe for clinic work while working right here in the Bay Area specifically, and what unique opportunities does learning from a clinic at Berkeley Law offer to students?
Yeah, for me, I think being at a public university, the top public university in the country, I think you have a lot of opportunities to work on projects that a lot of nonprofits sometimes don't have the resources or the capacity to do. So that's one of the value adds that we often bring as the clinic, having kind of the stamp and the resources of the university to work on sometimes really controversial issues that people aren't eager to take on. So some of the work that I do is on criminal justice reform in California. So a lot of work with the ACLU, Western Center on Law and Poverty, folks of that nature, in trying to change the narrative about what's happening on public safety and crime, gathering the evidence and data to show that the trends aren't what the media is putting out there to be. And so having the voice of the university come and do that is really powerful. Nonprofits can go up there and say all these things, but when our students, when we get up there to say those things in front of policymakers, we have a different impact. And so trying to figure out out how to channel that. Some of you may have heard of the topic of movement lawyering. How do we build kind of collective action and power of people who have been disenfranchised, under-resourced, and underrepresented by bringing them to the table? And so I think that's one big role that the clinics can play on really controversial, hard social justice issues in ways that nonprofits or other organizations just can't do. I think the other thing that, I think we'll touch on a little bit, just the variety of interventions that the clinics offer, from individual representation, litigation, policy, transactional. We can also target issues from different angles, which I think is really important. The law is not just one tool, and even there are other tools outside of the law that I think all of our clinics try to underscore. It's not the answer to everything. Sometimes you need kind of broader solutions to address systemic problems. So I don't know, that was a big spiel, and I can go on, but I will pass it over.
Yeah, I mean, I would just mention a couple of other forums. I mean, the legislature certainly can be quite helpful in passing good reforms, but we also have the California Supreme Court, which, given what the United States Supreme Court is doing these days, is an alternative venue if one were, for example, interested in seeking expansive interpretations of privacy law or certain other values. And we also have the California Privacy Protection Agency, which is the only broad-based privacy regulator in the United States right now. Jennifer Urban, who's the co-director of the Samuelson Tech Clinic, is also chair of the board of that commission, and they just do really exciting path-breaking work, right? There's them, and then there's like the European Union, right? And that's kind of it. So that's sort of a unique opportunity here. And I was also just put in a plug for one of the reasons. I used to be an ACLU lawyer, and now I'm here. And I love the way Berkeley connects research faculty to clinical faculty who both do research and practice to community lawyers. So for example, together with one of your colleagues at EBCLC and also the Alameda County Public Defender Service, but also some of my criminologist colleagues, we did a big project trying to change how juvenile probation officers use ankle bracelets, GPS tracking ankle bracelets on kids going through the juvenile justice system to try to limit the use of that technology and change how it was used to be less problematic for kids. And without that pipeline of people with such different expertise and knowledge bases, we could not have made the difference that we did. So that's another great thing about doing this type of work at Berkeley.
Yeah, I guess I would add, at the East Bay Community Law Center, we're hyper-local. We are embedded here in the community. We serve clients all over the county, all over Alameda County, which is quite large. And just to give you an example, I mean, at the height of the pandemic, we saw the crisis that our clients were in, losing jobs, losing family members, and then faced with, the impossible situation of how am I going to pay rent? So our housing team went into action and advocated for a moratorium on evictions. It was one of the first in the country and the longest standing moratorium. That was really informed by our direct services work. So both at EBCLC, we take a both-and approach. So we're both operating within the systems as they currently exist, helping our clients navigate those systems, while simultaneously trying to change and make larger systemic impact. As we know, many of these systems contribute to the oppression of our clients. And so the eviction moratorium was an important piece of policy advocacy that we worked on. It has since been lifted, and now we've seen the onslaught of eviction cases here in Alameda County. And so our attorneys are helping people en masse, navigate those lawsuits, and are there at the courthouse every Wednesday with their law students, with clinic students, helping to negotiate settlements in these cases. So it's a critical time for the Bay Area. And a critical time, frankly, for you all to be in clinic here. So I hope you'll give that serious consideration as you're thinking about why Berkeley Law. So how might students go about choosing clinics? How does that work here at Berkeley Law?
Yeah, I think, you'll talk to a lot of people, people in second and third year law students about kind of the experiences that they've had. We'll have info sessions, so even before you can apply, we have info sessions in the fall and in the spring. We're going to be having one in April. for students who are going to be applying in the fall. So you get to hear more about the clinics that are being offered, what are the projects that we're working on, and we have kind of tabling sessions so you can go up and ask us specific questions. Usually then there's an application process where you can rank which clinics. So say you wanted to do all of our clinics, you could do EBCLC first, Samuelson second, and Policy Advocacy Clinic third, and we try to place people based on that. Every year there's a high demand, so we try to do our best to accommodate everyone, but hopefully during your time at Berkeley Law, you'll be able to do at least a clinic that you're interested in doing. That's generally the mechanics of it, but I don't know if you all have other thoughts on how students decide what they want to do.
The one thing I will say is, like, we talked about earlier the opportunities to try different things. There are quite a few students I've known who have done multiple clinics, and some have even done clinics for all of 2L and 3L. So you can do, there's no real limit in terms of the amount of clinic. The only rule is that you can't do more than one in a given semester, which makes sense given the time commitment. So I guess as a final question, can you give a couple examples or think of any examples of transformative experiences you've seen students have in clinic at Berkeley Law? Or impactful experiences?
Yeah, I can start. I'm thinking of a student who's going to be graduating this year who I talked as a student who was thinking about coming to Berkeley Law. She's from Hawaii, and we have a project where we're trying to end the practice of charging fees and fines to young people in Hawaii. So she's been able to not only draft legislation in her home state of what that would look like, grapple with opposition from judges in the state, argue with them about the constitutionality of what we're doing, and won, I will argue. She's testified in front of committee hearings, had the opportunity to travel just a couple weeks ago to meet with stakeholders, both community partners, legislators, ACLU of Hawaii, other kind of policy advocates there, and is working on trying to see through legislation in her home state. And I know that's been really impactful for her. She's going to be going to a firm, but she hopes to be back in her home state doing work in the nonprofit world, and the connections that she's built has been really important for her. So that's one that comes to mind. I'll also say for me, I identify as an introvert. I was really shy when I came into law school, and I was definitely thrown into the driver's seat and was like, okay, you're going to be prepping your client for a hearing. You have to navigate all of that, the back and forth, the questioning from the judge, and it was a terrifying experience for me. But it was the best thing that happened. And now public speaking is a big part of my job and what I do every day. And so it really, I think, again, kind of the safe and supportive space to try out things that you're uncomfortable with, grapple with questions of, I could go this way with representing my client and talk about race, and that could have a really big impact. We also know maybe this judge, doesn't want to be called a racist, and so it may have a negative impact. So, how do you navigate that and being able to talk with your supervisors about the pros and cons of that and making a decision in consultation with your client of, we want to argue the best case for you, and so how are we going to do that? And so I think that's also really important, there's no sometimes right answer to putting the law into practice, and so how are you going to make those decisions, and what kind of lawyer do you want to be? So that for me is clinic is where I found my voice. Classes was not kind of the space that I felt that I could learn. I was the person who did clinic for my second and third year of law school for the maximum number of units I could, because that's where I felt that I got the most out of law school.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think those are my favorite moments too, particularly supporting a student to do something that they've never done before, that they weren't even sure they knew how to do, right? Doing their first federal district court argument, or testifying before a state legislature, or even, smaller things, like some students are just super nervous talking to clients. They've never run a meeting before. They're not sure how to do that. Building up those competencies so when people get to their first jobs, they're like, actually, I can do this, and they just impress everyone around them because they're not having those jitters, those first-time jitters, when they're in their jobs. And then also, other big moments are when you help a student figure out, this is where I want to start my career, right? I want to go work for this this organization or in this field. And those are really great moments that make it fun to teach, but are also really meaningful for students.
So I'm mindful of time. I want to definitely allow time for questions from you all. So you're going to Stephanie's going to run around with the mic. Ask away. We're here. We're here to answer.
Okay, I'm going back over here.
Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciated the panel. My name is Ebony. I just wanted to ask about, well, one, I think clinical experience is really important for the law school experience. In doing clinics, how can you support students in sort of emotionally, and especially when it takes like a toll on their mental health? Because from a student standpoint, right, you're learning and it's your first time. You don't want to mess up, but at the same time, these are real like clients, real problems, your actions have real consequences. How can you, what is the support system like for students who are worried about like, messing up somebody's life forever?
I hear that, and I see that. And yeah, I think this is where it's important to have community. I think that's where it becomes critical in clinic, and it's certainly true of us in practice, lawyers in practice. You're doing work that takes a toll. It is high stakes, and it is somebody's life often that we're talking about, and emotionally, it can be draining, intellectually and emotionally. And so it's important to have people you can lean on, you can talk to, you can laugh with, you can cry with. That can be your supervisor. We develop close, trusting relationships with the students that we're supporting and teaching, but also your colleagues in clinic. Things are confidential, privileged. You can't really talk about it outside of clinic. So these are your people. This is where, again, you have a safe space to talk about what you're worried about. What are your greatest fears about it? Let's talk about it, and let's talk about how can we prepare such that we feel like, we're positioning ourselves in the best way that we can to again, give it our best effort, because ultimately, when it comes to the systems that we're working within, they're stacked against our clients. They are not set up to produce just outcomes. We know that. And so it is often feels like trying to push a boulder up a steep mountain, and it feels impossible. But again, you have support, and sometimes we do win. Sometimes we are successful in achieving the outcomes that our clients are looking for, in achieving their goals. So it can be a real mixed bag, but it is a great experience in terms of there's nothing more rewarding than knowing that even when we lose, that you stood by your client's side and you went through it with them, and they had that support throughout, and that you treated them with dignity and respect when the system did not. That counts for something. So we also talk about what it means to like redefine victory in clinic. That's really important.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'll add is that we meet with students on a regular basis, and so at least 3 times we have learning goals check-ins, kind of mid-semester, end of semester. So there's constant room for conversations about how things are going. Sometimes I'll have calls with my students and a client, and it didn't go so well, and they come into my office right after to talk about it, and we're like, okay, what did we do well? What can we do differently next time? And so there's constant room for kind of reflective practice. And our doors, we try to be as available as we can. This is kind of, we love what we do, and so we're always open to talking to students about the things that are coming up for them. So I'll hand in the back.
Hi, I'm Anna. Thank you so much. So my question was that I've read about legal services projects that are initiated by students. And like, for example, there was one on reproductive justice that I was really interested in. And I was wondering if those operate in the same spheres as clinics, or what the differentiation is.
Thanks. You're asking about the slips. Those are, generally speaking, opportunities made available to 1Ls sort of on a pro bono basis to, get your feet wet with pro bono work during your first year. And they're on an amazing and dazzling and ever-shifting array of topics. Typically what happens is people will do something like that during their first year, and then in the spring of their 1L year, if they're wanting a sort of a bigger public interest experience in terms of hours and intensity of supervision, you might apply for a clinic at that point. So that's how those are interrelated.
Okay, have to run all the way over there, but yes. Okay, while we're doing that. Sometimes in the policy advocacy clinic, we have students who bring us projects. They're like, oh, we have a client who really wants to work on this. So on occasion, when I was a student, a couple of us were really wanting to work on the Affordable Care Act at the time and healthcare reform. So the director at the time let us do that. Not all the clinics are set up to do that, but occasionally it can happen depending on what the issue is and who the client might be.
Sorry to make you run over here. So suppose that someone participates in your clinic, so at Samuelson, at EBCLC, or at the Advocacy Project, and they're really excited about the work they do that semester. Is there a way for that student to continue engaging with those clinics, whether it is repeating the clinic for a subsequent semester, or are there ways that your respective clinics sort of structure alternative ways to continue engaging with the work?
Yeah, absolutely. Many students do a clinic for multiple semesters, right? So they'll start in their 2L fall and they'll keep going for 2, 3, or even 4 semesters. And those are often the students who just get a tremendous amount of clinic, because the first semester the semester is 14 weeks long, right? Like you can do a lot in 14 weeks, but there's a pretty steep learning curve. So if you can keep going for multiple semesters, you can do something, much deeper, right? So it's students like that who end up writing the opening brief and then they write the reply brief. And then when the oral argument comes around, like they're the perfect person to do that. So we love our recidivist clinic students.
I've also had students who maybe didn't come. So one important thing to know, a couple things, is that when you come back to clinic as a returning student, if you're coming back to the same clinic, there's flexibility about how many units you take it for. So while the rule is it has to be 4 units when you're brand new, you could come back for 1 or 2 units as a returning student to work on something maybe like you want to continue working on a specific, with a specific client or on a brief that you were working on, but for fewer hours. There's more flexibility. The other thing, I've worked with former clinic students on their writing requirement. So they maybe decided they wanted to write a note or something like that. And so I worked with them on developing that. And that's sort of outside of clinic, but was related to the work that they were doing in clinic that they wanted to keep writing about.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I had a question about, and I'm sure it varies because you have a lot of clinic offerings, but are clinics typically like a student says, okay, I want to work kind of in this specific area, or is it kind of dependent on like what the clinic is offering that semester? Like, to what degree is it student focused and just like, these are the cases that we have this semester?
I can respond for EBCLC and let Stephanie and Catherine respond regarding their clinics. But at EBCLC, yes, we don't necessarily have control over what comes through the door, what clients are coming to us, and what's the nature of the cases. We have a general sense, but what we do at the start of the semesters, we have all of our students, they write a learning goals memo. So this is an important tool for your supervisor to understand what are your goals for clinic, what are the skills that you're hoping to really develop or hone in on during your time with us. Maybe it's doing an oral argument or really, really working on your writing. Or it's a particular kind of case that you would really love if you were able to work on. Those are important things for us to know because, again, even though we can't control what comes in the door, we can often try and tailor depending on, again, the caseload that we have and the opportunities that we have. So we do try to meet up with interest with no promises, but often I think we're able to achieve the objectives that our students have.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, our projects, particularly I think for the policy side, are pretty much set. We know that there are better projects for students. Not everything's going to be a great project for students, so we try to tailor it a little bit up front. But that said, we often tell or admit students in May, and I will say, hey, these are the projects, and then come August, I'm like, actually, some of those imploded because life happens. This is not a simulation, and so it may change. So it kind of varies depending on the project, but even, we have projects that start up in September, and then something happens where it's like, actually, we are gonna have to pivot because, some agency did something, or whatever it may be. So that's also something to remember about clinic. It's like we don't always have control, but that's the point. Other questions, and I'm happy to come around in front.
This question is actually for you, since you attended Berkeley Law. And it's based on the assumption that you did public interest work after. How was that for your career and managing the finances after? And like, do you recommend it?
So yeah, so I, after graduation, actually worked for EBCLC. Berkeley Law, you may have heard, they have public interest fellowship. So I was part of that cohort where Berkeley Law basically paid me to work at an organization who was willing to host me. And so that really, I think, laid the foundation for my career to continue the work here. Finance-wise, they pay, I think, fairly well now. I think it's like, I don't know, 65, 70K a year, which is on par with public interest work. You know, depending on, you know, some of you may be coming here thinking about loans and all of that. I am definitely the person who took all the loans, and I am still paying that off. But 10-year public service loan forgiveness for me is next year. So it is real, and it can happen. But yeah, I mean, as long as you work in kind of public interest government and you know that that's kind of the path that you're on, I know a number of people in my class are on that path. So it's possible, and I think the Career Development Office is doing a great job at providing resources, even early on as 1L, talking to you about here's what you should be thinking about and setting yourself up to be successful if public interest is the path that you want to go down.
I can attest. So I got loan forgiveness last year, and it was one of the best pieces of mail I ever got. So it does happen. And I would say, you know, in the nonprofit sector, it is challenging. You know, the salaries there are limits to what we can do. I think things are slowly improving. A lot of organizations, including ours, EBCLC, are unionizing. So we are an organized workplace. That has helped to push up salaries a bit. But again, you know, we're operating within a system that relies heavily on philanthropy, that relies on government funding, and there are all kinds of, you know, issues with that. But it is possible to make it work, and it is incredibly rewarding. I'll say that.
Yeah, so wow, all three of us did the loan forgiveness program. I also remember that piece of mail coming in saying 10 years on my loans had been forgiven. Look, I think it makes it possible, but it doesn't change the fundamental inequality between what a nonprofit lawyer makes and what a big firm lawyer makes. And if you need to go make money, there is no shame in that. Go to your firm and feel good about it, because some of us have to take care of our families and our loved ones and ourselves. And it's a long career. You can go do one thing at first. As long as you're always learning and building skills, you can go do something else later. You're always going to be valuable to someone. So, you know, I think for those of you who have the opportunity to just go do public interest because you're in the financial situation to do that, particularly with the loan forgiveness program, more power to you. But a lot of people aren't there, and that's fine as well.
As I guess one other thing that I'll mention, we have, Berkeley Law has a loan repayment program. So as long as you're making, I forget what it is now, maybe 120 or less a year, Berkeley helps pay for some of your monthly payments. So that helps a lot too. You're not kind of going to be on pay that monthly payment by yourself. Other questions? Okay.
Hi, I'm Harleen. Flew in from London last night, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. So I was wondering how you support students who might want to launch their public interest careers in DC, especially since clinical work is such an important part of kind of building those connections. I guess I'm a little worried about kind of like the regional stickiness when it comes to like the experiences people might gain here and how that can be kind of transferred to DC.
Stephanie, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I know for our clinic we have some work that we're doing a national campaign, and so part of that is working not only in other states, but seeing whether there are federal interventions. So definitely there are clinic projects where you'll be engaging with organizations and policymakers from across the country. In DC, there's a lot of people, philanthropy folks, nonprofits, legislators, advocates that we're in touch with every day. We also have, and I'm going to butcher the name, we have like a DC study abroad.
UCDC?
UCDC. So there is a specific program that where you can spend a semester actually working in DC, whether it's in a particular agency, a committee. So a lot of students do that for a semester and find that a really valuable way to build those connections and see kind of if that's what they want to do post-graduation.
You guys have spoken to the kind of natural advantage that comes from working in a clinic in applying your studies. I'm curious if you've noticed the same complementary relationship for your students in terms of, going to your clinics and that improving your course performance as well.
I think certainly for some of the students that I've worked with, just being able to have additional sort of one-on-one support, particularly as it relates to their writing and research skills, has been, I think, very beneficial in terms of their academics and their confidence too. It's like part of it is just like law school's daunting and it makes you doubt yourself, and all of the things that you did before in terms of the strategies for studying and for even writing, all of that, it's different. You have to shift gears, and that can be really hard and destabilizing. So clinic is a space where, again, you're going to get support, good feedback that you can incorporate, and also just have a space to talk to your peers and your supervisors about like what worked for you, to the extent that you have questions about that. But I have seen it be beneficial in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's also helpful to see law in practice. You'll read a lot of, statutes and cases that say, this is what's supposed to happen. And then when you represent someone, you're like, that never happens. Or, judges are supposed to use their discretion and be fair. And it's like, we all know what happens and what, bias and discretion can mean. And so I think it's really powerful to see that play out. And students who have that experience, I think, can bring that into the classroom, into whether that's exams, taking the bar, and have that just different perspective of honestly just being questioning about, this is what the law says. Is it actually doing that? What was the intent behind it? I think is really helpful to have that perspective. Other questions?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rochelle. I have a question in regards to like how the clinics operate, like outside the clinic, but with the community, because sometimes I notice like we're here at Berkeley, we come from a place of privilege inherently, and you're working with clients who usually don't have that same privilege of whether it's like money or race or ethnicity or whatever the case may be. How is that addressed in the clinics to make sure it's not just, oh, it's so-and-so at Berkeley who has all this money to go to school and who's coming to save me, or who thinks they're better than me, or who thinks they know better than me, and like how does that work in communication with the people you serve?
That's such a great question. I appreciate you asking it. One of the learning objectives that we have at EBCLC with our students is humility. It's really approaching the work and being humble about where you're coming from and understanding that our clients are the experts of their lives. You are there to listen and bear witness and help them maybe distill what their goals are, and then help to develop a strategy for how to get there. But you are not there to pass judgment about anything that you hear or see. Again, you may be at Berkeley Law and you are in a position of privilege, but you are there to support and provide whatever guidance that you can, given the skills that you have. But again, it's about having that humility and understanding that you cannot, even if you share some aspects of your identity with your clients, you can't assume that you've had the same experiences. And so you need to be mindful of that as a student. It's about building trusting relationships, and that's not easily done sometimes. A lot of that comes down to really listening to what your clients are asking, the questions that they have, taking the time to really hear them out. A lot of our clients have been turned away 1 million times before they get to our door, and they just want someone to hear them out. And so that's an important thing that we can do, is give our time and just really listen to them. And so that can go a long way. Same for the community-based organizations that we work with. We work in coalition with a lot of organizations It's about building trusting relationships. A lot of these organizations are led by and comprised of people that are directly impacted by the systems that we're working within and trying to change, and they are the ones leading the effort. We're there to lend whatever we can as lawyers with the specific skill set that we have, and as Stephanie said, there's real limitations to that, and we need to also be humble about that. We're there really to, again, to be in this sort of position of service. That's the orientation.
Yeah, and I think on the policy side, it's very easy to do top-down policy making, and so that's something that we try to orient all of our projects around. All of our projects are on behalf of clients and coalitions, people who are directly impacted, and they're making the decisions. We're just carrying out those decisions, so that's really important to us. And the other thing that I think a lot of us try to do is, when we have an opportunity to either, whether it's getting resources, when I'm asked to testify somewhere, and they're so like, okay, you come in as Berkeley, I'm like, and I am bringing someone from the community because they're the ones who need to tell their stories. I can say it for them, but they're going to do a much better job. They're the expert in their own life. And so I think we're also very conscious of, in the spaces and places that we're invited to speak, that we're also making room for people that have been excluded and marginalized from those spaces. I saw a hand in the back. How are we on time?
We've got 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Last question.
Where was the hand?
Thank you so much for the information so far. I was wondering, are there any language requirements or other non-law specific skills that are prerequisite for some of the clinics?
There are none at EBCLC. We don't have any language requirements. Certainly, for instance, at our immigration clinic, it's a tremendous benefit to the extent that you speak a second language or other languages, but there's no requirement around that. I don't know.
Yep, none for us either. And I'm not familiar with any of our clinics
think
having a non-law requirement.
Not requirement. International Human Rights Law Clinic sometimes has projects where if they need to speak a particular language. I know some of our clinics take on students from other departments on campus. So the Master's in Public Policy program. I know there's been some public health people, maybe journalism, to kind of the I-School, the J-School, I-School information. So sometimes there's interdisciplinary projects that happen, but definitely, yeah, not in the way of requiring.
We try to make it as low barrier as possible. We want, students that are making the commitment to come here to Berkeley Law, to be able to have access to the experiences, especially around clinics. And so, yeah, we're very excited for all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Best of luck with your decisions. And yeah, stay in touch. Thank you.